Our next presenter is Moriah Williams. Moriah is a white queer autistic writer and somatic practitioner who lives in the southwestern United States. They have a special interest in the interplay between healing, self, and society, and what this means in the context of neurodivergence and various marginalized and centered identities. Moriah?
Oh, okay. I couldn't unmute myself before.
Oh.
Thank you so much, Rakshita, and thank you, Truhap. And it's just so exciting to be here. And what a great event. Thank you for having me. I'm just starting my timer here. Let me share my screen. Whoops. I guess I need to share and then. Okay. 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 I'm still learning Zoom slides, so bear with me. So just a brief introduction. So I thought this was really important because autistic people and allistic or non-autistic people can have very different boundaries. And understanding these differences can help us better understand each other and advocate for ourselves. And this is not a how-to presentation about what kind of boundaries you should have. This is a presentation about some considerations that may support you in deciding what kinds of boundaries are right for you. And I won't go through everything on the slides. I put an autistic amount of information on them. You know, to me, that's a real part of consent and letting people form their own opinions. But these slides will be on the Truhap website. And there's also extra slides for suggestions for exploring boundaries on your own or with people in your life. And as Rakshita mentioned, I'll be teaching an upcoming class for Truhap, expanding on this material. So what are boundaries? So the simplest explanation I've heard is they're what is okay and what is not okay. And some other explanations are boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. And this one from Jaya John, actually Lydia Brown posted it recently. A consistent light around you that announces I will be treated sacredly. And I think of boundaries a lot as edges and meeting places. There's a lot of different kinds of boundaries we have, and they're how we make space for ourselves and meet ourselves, as well as how we make space for others and meet others. And there are no universal boundaries, only personal, relational, and situational. And so these are some things that boundaries can give us. I'm just going to list them briefly. So they can give us clarity, orientation, safety, rest, comfort, space, choice, respect, consent, empowerment, and connection. And so my own journey, so I'm self-diagnosed in my late 30s. And I feel like I was actively kept from community. I spent about almost 20 years questioning and just everybody telling me, no, you can't be autistic, you have empathy, or, you know, like whatever kinds of stereotypes they had. And so I really didn't have the language for what I was experiencing or the power dynamics involved in boundaries. And luckily I've had, and, you know, and I had a lot of shame and isolation about the things that are autistic about myself, you know, and those are the most me things there is. So it was really difficult. But luckily I've had the privilege of having access to various trainings that gave me some tools for self-reflection. And I also found autistic community in my mid-30s. That's really sort of when I was able to assert that I was autistic. You know, and it's a complex process, but the more I befriend myself, it's the easier it is to navigate boundaries. And so here's a few ways that autistic boundaries can differ from non-autistic boundaries. And Damian Milton says this social misunderstandings that can happen between autistic and allistic people is called the double empathy problem. So we can just miss each other because we have such different orientations. You know, we can have different sensory considerations, different ways we inhabit our body and space and time and routine. You know, we have very different communication aptitudes and values. You know, there's different ways that we engage in relationships and feel our emotions, and differences in hygiene and housekeeping. You know, we have differences with all these various things. And boundaries can be hard to regulate and understand when they change a lot. For example, we can be at one end of a spectrum one day and the other end the next, or we could be any combination of both extremes at once. You know, like here with thoroughness, like we might give a one-word answer, or we might spend half an hour folding a napkin. Like there's this whole range of where we might be on any of these axes. And this, I shared this, it's a conversation on Tumblr, I think, among a couple autistic people talking about how they can hear electricity. And so to me, this is a really good example of why our boundaries are so different. You know, if you can hear something that most of the world isn't even aware of, it's like we have different sensitivities in different places we need to set boundaries. And so I think so the next couple of slides are the heavier slides. I think it's really important to talk about boundary challenges so we know how to orient and make decisions. And I think the challenges of developing healthy boundaries when people are marginalized or made to feel that our very existence is wrong are several. So, you know, the first problem is we navigate boundaries in a world full of boundary dysregulation. You know, there's not a lot of healthy boundaries in the world. You know, there's a lot of us have experienced pain and suffering, and there's a lot of ways that people are told they're wrong, and there's a lot of ways that, you know, we don't have enough resources to be our healthy selves. So we don't have a lot of models, you know, and we don't necessarily have the language, and we can get punished. And there's real safety and survival considerations. And like with the slide with electricity, it can be hard for people to even understand that our boundaries are real sometimes. I remember one time I was staying at somebody's house and there was mold in the washing machine. And so I couldn't use their towels because they were moldy, but the host had no idea what I was talking about. And so here's some other challenges. So it's easy to feel like we don't deserve to have different boundaries. And so this one's really important. So the burden to change themselves falls on the person with less power. And so we can end up, and when we are forced to habitually ignore our boundaries, we can end up disconnecting from our neurological signals. And so there's also boundary challenges internal to the community. You know, many of us are in crisis, and so, you know, and many of us are unsupported, so we can overextend ourselves for each other. Or on the other hand, we might isolate from community because there's a lot of unresolved trauma, and because marginalized community is not an oasis from all the other unequal power dynamics in society. And I really love this concept from Kai-Chung Tom that scarcity breeds abuse. You know, a lot of times we'll settle because we just can't get what we really need. And then I wanted to talk about some autistic boundary strengths. And so these are generalizations. We have a lot of identities that influence how we experience autism. including our unresolved trauma or unexamined privilege or other kinds of marginalization. But a lot of us tend to have very strong feelings about ethics, including about fairness and cruelty and kindness. And a lot of us explore information before forming opinions, so we don't have like a really quick projection a lot of times. And a lot of us are very comfortable with allowing others to be different from us. You know, I think that's a real gift. And we tend to be frank and genuine. And sometimes we have freedom from social standards that we're not invested in, you know, and we like constructive feedback. And, you know, we can have a real connection to the inner life of things. And we can have a very high investment in relationships, whether that's with people or with animals, or, you know, trying to throw away a sock can be very difficult for us because we're invested in the sock. And so some elements of developing healthy boundaries, it's really important to have support. It's really important to understand your own signals and preferences. And that's a lot of what's in the reflective exercises that I'm offering here. And it's really important to have compassion for yourself. You know, a lot of us have not had access to what we need to understand ourselves or be kind to ourselves. And so healing shame and giving yourself permission to playfully explore your boundaries and being aware of the safety, you know, being aware of who you can explore this with and where you need to mask is really important, as many people have said. And so these are a few examples of kinds of boundaries. So there's internal boundaries with yourself and your space, which are also interpersonal. You know, there's boundaries about inner experience, your internal conflicts, your physical environment and stimuli, and time, and your body, your energetic field. And then boundaries in relation to others, which of course also have internal components. So understanding and responding to other people's boundaries and asking for and offering clarification, you know, and figuring out how direct does it make sense to be. And there's others about, you know, are we the intrinsic functionality versus secondary functionality of an activity? You know, are we performing an activity for other people's social comfort or because it feels meaningful to us? You know, and then how can we find alternatives when there are boundary differences that can meet everyone? And, you know, when to engage and disengage, when it's okay to diverge from situations, and when it's necessary to mask. And are there any additional supports, like noise canceling headphones can protect us from too much stimulation. And it can also protect our loved ones from hearing us listen to a song on repeat. I don't know if any of you do this, but I definitely do. And then I made these charts. I also made blank ones if you want to work with them yourself. This is just a construct, but I just, you know, we have a lot of social pressure about having atypical boundaries. And so, you know, as well as internal pressure about living in complete integrity. But, you know, it's not really possible to have perfect boundaries where we're completely respected. And so to me, it's really important to sort of think about what are my priorities in terms of self and relationships. So this axis is things that I have a lot of flexibility about internally, and then these are things that I just don't have flexibility about. And then this is how much effort it costs me. Like eating with silverware I like is very easy, and you know, I'm also fine if I don't get my favorite spoon. But I have very low flexibility about whether there's light in the room while I'm sleeping. So that, like, this is something that I always do. I just put a shirt over my face when I go to sleep. And so this is something that I have a lot of flexibility about, ironing clothes, and it takes a lot of effort. So I never do it. I just wear clothes that I don't need to iron. You know, and then this is one that it's really important and it's really hard for me to regulate my sleep schedule. Um, and then I made another one for, I'm at my time almost. So this is also about how much flexibility I have versus social risk. You know, like making eye contact is something that like, I just can't make eye contact while I'm speaking, you know, and there is some social punishment for that, but I don't have control over that. Whereas flapping is something where I experience a lot of punishment and I have other ways to run energy. So I don't tend to do that. And then this one, regulating my exposure to fragrance. Whoops. Um, you know, I either have to change the situation or leave the situation or hurt myself, you know, and I'll make different decisions about that depending on what's happening. So I just thought that was, well, thank you very much. And you can email me if you have questions or, you know, I'm happy to talk to people about the class too. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.